The United States is still fighting its longest and most deadly war, the war on drugs. It's been 50 years since the fight began, but the movement has drawn great criticism for its systematic racism. While some believe it's a disgrace, others highly support the institution. In this episode, I will discuss who started the war on drugs, who it's affected, and the impact it has on today's America. I'm your host, Rachel Payton, and you're listening to the Chronicles of Time. It was June of 1971 when President Richard Nixon declared drug abuse to be public enemy number one. He did this to the rise of drug use in the United States during the 1960s and because the soldiers in Vietnam were developing heroin addictions. Oh, and another reason, but I'll use a quote from Nixon's counsel, John Ehrlichman, regarding the war on drugs. You really want to know what the war's about? The Nixon campaign in 1968 and the Nixon White House after that had two enemies, the anti-war left and black people. You understand what I'm saying? We couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black, but by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, then criminalizing both heavily, we could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did. So let's talk about this. The Nixon administration literally admitted to lying about the war on drugs. So why half a decade later is it still going? The entire institution is politically and racially driven. The ones lying to the citizens are the same ones making the laws. It's hard to believe our best interests are first. Nixon classified marijuana as a Schedule I drug. Other Schedule I drugs are heroin and meth. The DEA was also formed during his term. The Drug Enforcement Administration was created from the consolidation of the Office for Drug Abuse Law Enforcement, the Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs, and the Office of Narcotic Intelligence. Nixon's legacy still remains with the agency even after all these years. Might I add, the only time the majority of funding went to treatment rather than law enforcement was during the Nixon administration. But that's about the only credit I'll give the guy. After Nixon resigned, the war on drugs wasn't as prominent for a while. In fact, President Jimmy Carter even supported the decriminalization of marijuana. It wasn't until Carter's successor, Ronald Reagan, when the war on drugs was a complete focus. First Lady Nancy Reagan led the Just Say No campaign. The main focus was discouraging children from using illegal drugs by various ways of just saying no. Many celebrities like Clint Eastwood, Magic Johnson, Pee Wee Herman, Michael and LaToya Jackson, and Mike Tyson joined Nancy Reagan on the campaign. Who knew the answer to ending drug abuse was simply saying no? But seriously, President Reagan cracked down on the war on drugs, no pun intended. In October of 1986, Reagan signed the anti-drug abuse law. The bill devoted $1.7 billion to amplify the fight. The bill was controversial due to its creation of mandatory minimum prison sentences for certain drug offenses. Reagan himself came under heat in 1989 when a congressional report came out stating that the Reagan administration basically turned a blind eye to a cocaine ring ran by the U.S.-aided Contras in Nicaragua. In the States, the systematic racism from the war on drugs was growing deeper. Every statistic that came out was further proof that this war was a war on minorities. Cocaine was seen as a wealthy white man's drug, whereas crack was seen as a poor black man's drug. Yet, at the end of the day, cocaine and crack are made up of the same substance. But the sentencing is unimaginable between the two. It's a 100-to-1 ratio, cocaine to crack. 5 grams of crack will get you the same sentence that 500 grams of cocaine would. Even though the usage between the two groups is around the same, Black Americans are 6 times as likely as white Americans to have been incarcerated on drug charges. African Americans make up 40% of all United States prison inmates, and they actually serve the same amount of time in prison for drug offenses as whites do for violent crimes. And in many states, police issue possession citations at a far higher rate in Black and Latina neighborhoods in comparison to white ones. Not only is the war on drugs a racist one, but it's a highly ineffective one as well. The only drug that has decreased is the one that hasn't sent anyone to jail. nicotine. We allot all this time and money for things to just get worse. So why keep fighting a failing war? As of today, most of the money spent towards the war on drugs is used for punishing rather than help or treatment. Annually, the federal government spends $3 billion, $9 million a day to lock up drug offenders. But here's the problem. They aren't locking up the top dog. There is 6 times the amount of drug possession arrests compared to drug sales arrests. Nearly 500,000 Americans are currently incarcerated for drug-related offenses. The United States imprisons more inmates than any other country, even though we make up 5% of the world's population. These statistics may make you uncomfortable, but they happen to be the facts of our country. Over 58,000 people died in the Vietnam War, but more people die annually from drug overdoses. Why have we become so numb to drugs as a society? It's time to end the longest and deadliest war in the United States, and it's up to our lawmakers to do it. Thank you for listening to my episode on the war on drugs. If you have any questions or comments, email me at thechroniclesoftimepodcast@gmail.com. If you want more content, follow my Facebook and Instagram page. New episodes come out every Wednesday. And if you like this episode, leave a rating and review. I'm your host, Rachel Payton, and thank you for listening to the Chronicles of Time.